Hello, welcome. We're glad to have you here. As you come in, can you please type your name and where you are joining us from? I'm Alexandra and I am in Richmond, Virginia.
And I'm Robyn Harvey, and I'm here from DeKalb, Illinois.
Hi, Anna from Wichita. Hi, Amy from Massachusetts. Welcome. Hi, Colette. She's in Michigan. Robyn's in DeKalb. Betty's in California. Sandra is in LA. Thanks for joining us. I know it's early there. Hi, Belinda from Texas.
I love watching all of these different states come in. California and Texas and Virginia and Illinois. Oh, we have somebody from DC, Lawan. Hi, Lawan.
Nubia from Oregon. And Belinda says that I guess there's a storm expected to hit Texas?
Yeah.
No. No, it doesn't put you in a good state of mind.
It does. It does. I love the gathering of all these people.
Hi, Kim.
And Louisa from Wilmington, North Carolina. Awesome. Welcome. Oh, in Colorado. See, we have like 20 states and Ohio. This is so great. We have people gathering from all points of the United States.
Nice. We have every time zone represented. So we're going to get started. This month we've been doing our Amplify, and today we're going to be talking about advocating for social justice in and outside of the home. I'm your host, Alexandra James-Okochi. I'm the Chief Program Officer of Be Strong Families.
And I'm Robyn Harvey. I'm the Director of Training and Technical Assistance for Be Strong.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Next slide. And we have Andrew, who's in the background, giving us our technical support. So the format of the webinar, this is especially true for people who have been joining us since we've started this. We changed it a little bit. Today, we're just going to spend a little bit of the first time giving you some background and context for the topic. From there, we will discuss our subject for today. The questions are actually taken from our More Perfect Union deck, which was designed to find ways to bring unity while affirming diversity. It's also about the point at which parents and nexus of social justice meet outside of the home. The webinar will be live streamed to our YouTube channel, and the recording will be available when the webinar has ended. So the ways to engage: when you're ready to speak, please raise your hand and we will unmute you, and then you will need to unmute yourself. Feel free to type your comments in the group and chat, and make sure it's going to everyone, not just panelists. And be patient with us sometimes when we are going through the chat, because sometimes they come quick, which we love. That means people are engaged. So we have some agreements that we like to operate from to make sure this is a safe space for expressing ourselves, being authentic, and mutual sharing and learning. We want to speak from our own experiences and use I statements. We operate under the golden rule. We're going to treat people the way we want to be treated. We want everyone to bring their full presence, no multitasking, but if you need a minute, take a minute. If you agree, what you already see, some of our regulars are here, please type I agree in the chat. Andrew also put a link to the More Perfect Union Café, to our website, if you like a little bit more information about Be Strong Families in general, and specifically the More Perfect Union Café. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing. And next slide, please.
All right, so we're going to start this conversation today from a parenting focus. And that I'm a mom, Alex is a mom, and we really are invested in getting our kids involved and maintaining that involvement in social justice. All right, so there's some things that we can talk about that we can do from 0 to 3 to kind of get that ball rolling. If you guys have ideas, ladies and gentlemen, please put them in the chat. You can go ahead and type them. What are some things that you all do to start the conversation, to start the ball moving? We know that we have to plant seeds with our kids. We have to model those things. But what are some of those seeds? What is some of that modeling? What does that look like?
And so I'll go ahead. In the article, one of the things that I found very interesting, and it's something that I did. I'm the mother of 15-year-old identical girl twins. And the biggest thing is that we know at that age that children are very impressionable and they're starting to absorb the images that are around them, the TV shows. So I think of being very intentional about the types of books that you have, that they are include a lot of diversity, show a lot of different kinds of people doing that 0 to 3 when you're reading them stories, when they're reading along with you, I think makes a really big difference. Also, having books that are about what is fair, and what and just kind of setting the stage for them to be able to understand that they live in a multicultural environment starts by just the images that they see in the home, and in the books that you're reading.
And you know, Alex, one thing that my husband and I really intentionally did while my kids were growing up, because for those of you who don't know, I'm an adoptive parent, so I have 8 sons. And so some of them look like me and are Caucasian white, some of them are Latino, and some of them are biracial. So we were really committed to bringing everybody's cultures inside of our home and exploring those outside of our home. We wanted everybody to feel comfortable with who they were, what they looked like, and be immersed in kind of a global culture. So one of the things that we did was we invested in multicultural toys. All the toys didn't look like mom and dad. They looked like a range of the children and a range of the people that were in our community. We also went to a multicultural church. So when we turned to the right and the left, we weren't looking in the mirror. We were looking at people who were physically different than us, ethnically, racially, ably. We wanted to make sure that our kids were comfortable being part of a global community and not just comfortable in their specific culture. So we took them to, when my Latino boys wanted to do soccer, we took them a couple towns over where there was a larger Latino population, where they weren't playing with a bunch of, boys that didn't look like them. We wanted them to make sure that they had that grounding. When my kids needed medical care, I sought out a Latino doctor for them because I wanted them to see people in all walks of life and in all professions, success, different levels of success that
Hmm.
looked like they looked. So for our family, it went beyond what was inside and went outside. When I was growing up, my friends all looked like me. My friends all looked like my husband. When I started to be a parent, it became really important to me that I sought out and made genuine friendships with people who were different than me. I realized that I was raised in a little tiny town of almost all white people, and that my perspective, my worldview was so small. I knew that I had to do the work.
Thank you, Robin. So awesome. I'm gonna read some of the comments. Sandra said music and movement. Heidi said, I think being honest is important, that when my son asks questions about the world, I give him an answer that is honest and age appropriate. This is the world that he lives in, and I believe he deserves answers. I love that. Anna says she's so glad you mentioned this. My grandson asked me if he was white or Mexican. My reply was, you can be anything you want to be. He is mixed. And then Adrian has her hand raised. Hi, Adrian. You can unmute yourself.
Yep, and let me put my video on for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's always me first, right? So Robyn's laughing. So hi, Alexandra. So
Hi.
the thing is that you can't just bring all this stuff into your household or walk over to a church with different kinds of people or whatever. It's in actually making the friendships and becoming friends with these people so that you can hear their life experiences, which may not be the same as yours, and actually take action to help them. So it's not just one thing. You have to kind of engage it all the way through your life and everything that you do. So one thing that I did when I was raising my children, and it has been a long time, I was in Atlanta, and I was in a very interesting suburb where it has a history. It's often in the newspaper as I read about Georgia now. And what I did was I took my children to a book reading every whatever day of the week it was. And I kind of befriended a bunch of people at the book reading, and there were people who kept coming back. And the first thing I did was smile and, just try and be friendly, warm mom, because, I mean, I didn't know anybody. I was a transplant. So I had to find people in my own community. And I would ask them to come for pizza with me and my kids, which is always exciting when your child is not school age. So there was a pizza parlor like right down the street, and the book thing would end around 11. So it worked out perfectly. We would do our pizza and everything. And by 12 o'clock, we were out the door when everybody was coming in for a lunch rush. So the pizza place was always very accommodating towards our group, because we actually filled them up, a little bit during a dead moment. But at the same time, we were able to reach out to people who we would never have been able to reach out to otherwise in a way that was engaging. And even now, when my child is an adult now, I'm still in touch with those people. How's that? Pretty cool. And some of them are Black, and some of them are white, and some of them are different religions, and some of them are LGBTQIA+, and we're all friends. And it really was about just trying to get different kinds of people together to go and meet each other. And, perhaps our kids would be in school together and perhaps they would not, but it really was about the personal communication, and then being and continuing to be in touch with each other. And through that, I had some really cool experiences. I mean, I experienced a Kwanzaa that was my introduction to that entire American and African American culture that kind of got pulled in during the holiday season that I really didn't know about before that. And so now I feel like I can engage and learn more. And I think it's really important that we always understand that it may not be our culture, but it's a culture that we can learn about and that we can experience our way through other people, in the same way that other people can come and experience our cultural differences and the things that we do, and hopefully in a positive and supportive way.
Thank you, Adrienne. I
Thank you,
really
Adrienne.
appreciate the story. And I think that your story really drills down to one of the points in this article that talks with your children about racism can't be a one and done. It has to be a lifestyle. It has to be something that is a value of yours that you're authentically putting out there over and over and over, not through just our words, but through our very actions and through our interactions. So I appreciate you, kind of punctuating with that story. That's really cool. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Okay. I think we can go to the next slide.
Great. So this slide is really talking about empathy and how to build a sense of empathy within our family and within our children. And why I always say within our family, because it has to be a family affair. We can't just point to our children and say, you need to be empathetic, while we turned a blind eye to people's suffering and their perspective and their stories. We really need to model the behavior as parents that we want to see. So empathy, oh, I don't know how I got there. Hold on a sec. Sorry, my screen went crazy. Empathy is at the heart of what it means to be human. It's a foundation for acting ethically, for having our good relationships of many kinds, all kinds of relationships, and for loving people well. And honestly, for professional success, we have to have a level of empathy. It's the key to preventing bullying and all kinds of other forms of cruelty. So what do we do? How do we inspire our kids to have deep empathy for other human beings? According to the article that Andrew just posted up on the chat, we need to empathize with our child and model empathy for others. Why is it important for us to tune into our own children's feelings?
And I think one of the things, a lot of times when people, it goes back to the saying of, again, that kids don't do what you tell them, right? They do what they see. They model the behavior. And when you model the behavior, even with them, it creates that this is the way to be. This is the way to show up. And then you see it play out in their siblings. You'll see it play out. Or if there's a pet or with their friends, you don't even necessarily have to drill it down. If your way of being with them and each other in the house, if they see the empathy show up. And then when kids have more empathy, they usually have a better sense of emotional and social intelligence and being able to understand other people and being able to respect differences.
Yeah, so there's a little story I want to tell here, Alex. So I was raised in a house with a kind of a Vietnam vet who was a little bit erratic and a mom who didn't regulate her emotions so well. I wasn't taught about empathy. I mean, really, it was a really hard lesson for me to learn, and I learned it out in the world. I learned it from grandparents, but definitely not like a direct lesson from my mom and dad. So my fast forward 45 years or whatever, my little granddaughter now lives with us. She's 2 and she's so precious and she's so cute.
My little friend.
She's just so sweet. So she steps on my foot and I say, ow. And she laughs. But I got hurt. And so next time she gets hurt, I say to her, oh, I'm so sorry, Brina. You're hurt. What's hurting on you? And I show her kindness and compassion and empathy. Tell me about your story. How did you get hurt? Show me your little wound. And the next time she steps on my foot and I say, ow, she runs to me and says, I'm sorry, Grandma. So sorry. Did I hurt you? We have to model the behaviors we're looking for. Human beings, empathy doesn't always come naturally to humans. It has to be something that's taught. Like Alex was saying, it correlates directly with our emotional intelligence. And once we can teach those lessons in a calm, collected manner, and usually by modeling, not by saying you have to be kind, you have to be compassionate, you have to listen to people's stories, but by letting them see us do it and teaching them. So number 2 is make caring for others a priority and set high ethical expectations. So how do you show that you value caring? What are some things you do?
Maria said that was a great illustration, Robyn.
Oh, thank you, Maria.
Anyone? How do you show the value of caring? Actively listening, Maria said. I think for me, in relating it to social justice, is showing my children me serving. Now was easy because of the context that I've always of my profession, but I would bring them from even little, when I was at community centers in Northern Virginia, I would always bring them with me for different service events, different cultural events, and let them see me serving and why and what it needs. And kids naturally, most kids I think naturally want to be helpful, especially, in that 3 to 7 age. So making sure that you don't shut that down. My daughter had a very always wanted to, if I saw someone who was asking money for money on the street because maybe they were unhoused or something like that, my daughter would, Mommy, you need to stop. Let me give them my dollar. Like encouraging those moments, even though sometimes it's like, oh, I'm in a rush, or having them participate in other service events in the community. And then I also think telling them why we should care. Because even though we sometimes think, oh, are they going to explain this? I think somebody mentioned this before. Are they going to understand it? Sometimes they don't have to understand it. Sometimes just the messages being a part of their subconscious mind, you'll start to see those play out in their actions. And then Adrian says, say thank you when someone listens or cares. Definitely. Betty says, I think like Robyn said, modeling that you are care by listening attentively.
I think also like getting out into your community. Unfortunately, we live in a country that has a high rate of homelessness. When you see people who are struggling, what is your attitude towards them? Do you roll up your windows and lock your doors?
Yeah.
Or do you wave at them and smile, or even offer them something that you have, to make their day better? Showing our kids that it's okay to reach out to people who don't look like us and who are experiencing different levels of challenge than we do teaches them that it's okay to help. When we roll up our windows and we lock our doors and we say, oh, that person's there again, that sends this complete anti-empathy.
Or they're probably a scam, or they probably just have money. And
right.
Though that may exist, you can't say those things in front of children, because now then you're putting that idea that when someone is in need, they're not really in need. So yeah.
Well, and one of my kids once asked me, like, how do you know that they're really homeless? How do you know they're not like those 2020 people who are, watching the person who's acting homeless getting the Corvette around this corner? I said, but that's not on me. That's on them.
That's
I
exactly.
do right because that's what's in my heart. And what they do with what I give them is completely their business. Like loving without the outcome, like
Yes.
being tied to that outcome.
I always say, my mother taught me this, and I pass it to my daughter: we do the right thing regardless. In the chat, Heidi says, love that, Alexandra. Make time for your child to serve when they're expressing interest. What a rule to live by. Anna has her hands raised. Adrian says, I live in Los Angeles. It's a daily experience, and I'm doing so much behind the scenes to help the homeless. And Maria said, yes, Robyn. So Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hi there, you guys. I want to make a comment about this. I'm a very strong Catholic, and I started taking my son to church with me, my grandson, and I do Meals on Wheels. And it's so funny. He's the youngest Meal on Wheels delivery. He said, Grandma, why do these people get meals? And I said, well, because they have no family, they have anybody. So when we're teaching these kids by examples, we've got to throw them out what the community is about. The empathy also starts for him to understand why we do what we do. I will say that he's really smart. If somebody's hurt, he'll offer you their blanket, whatever he has. Sometimes it's food he's not, but it's taking these kids to whatever activity you're involved, giving Lord's Diner, giving meals, whatever you do. I feel that that's where they're learning the empathy, because it's hard if kids are not being raised in churches. I always tell everybody, I went to hear a doctor that talked about the brain. And he said one thing about the Catholic religion. He goes, you can go in that church, you know when you got to sit, you got to know when you kneel. So the kids are in a structure. When you go to the churches, well, they're a little bit different. But he says kids need to understand structure and why we do what we do. So I'm just going to comment on that. And thank you for allowing me to talk.
Thank you, Anna. We appreciate it. I think that Adrian made some really good points in there, in the chat about that everyone who is unhoused does not mean that they don't have a job. There are plenty of people, particularly in some of the higher cost of living, where people have full-time jobs, but because of the cost of living or other circumstances, they're not temporary, they don't have a home. So excellent point. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. The
And
other one.
Andrew
Okay.
mentioned that the book Evicted really helped him to begin to understand the issues within cities and landlords and the unhoused. And Adrian said, she wanted to remind us this isn't a legislative issue, that, we must be strong together to stop kicking people out of their homes and encourage communities and states to provide realistic options to house people. That is what houses people. Thank you, Adrian.
And I think we're 125, so this is so great. You all have like such great feedback.
So let me just go through the rest of these points and I won't ask the questions, and then we can dive into the AMPU questions, Alex, if you don't mind.
Definitely.
Number 3 is provide opportunities for children to practice empathy. We talked a little bit about that. Number 4, expand your child's circle of concern. Talk about who needs the empathy and action right now. What's going on? Number 5, I want to talk so badly about number 4, but I won't. There'll be another webinar. Number 5, help children develop self-control and manage their feelings effectively. Figure out what's blocking the empathy in your child. You don't want to be pouring water into a holy bucket. We got to kind of figure out what those blocks would be so that empathy lessons can stick and they can move into adulthood, understanding how to really care for people.
Next slide, Andrew. So this is some research, and I'm going to go through this really, really quickly. What the overall idea and premise with this was that children are born with a sense of fairness. They are already born with what should be fair, what is just, and what happens is that kind of what complicates that natural sense of fairness within little children are the stereotypes and the biases learned, group status and in-group preferences, sensitivity to repercussions if they're defying norms, and children's tendency to overgeneralize from self-identity. And so Andrew's going to put that in the chat. Very interesting article that just gives you a research-based perspective. Next slide, Andrew. And then these are some other resources around raising confident kids and social and emotional development, also just around social justice and how to talk about race. Feel free to check out some of these resources. And some of them are school-based perspectives as well. And then next slide, let's begin in our last 30 minutes or so. What does justice mean to you? What does justice mean to you? And thank you, Andrew.
Don't forget, you can put anything you want in the chat. You can answer the questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And we'll get you on fairness, is what Belinda says.
Anyone else?
Yeah, what does justice mean? Andrew says never taking justice for granted. All right, and equity. And then equality, that may include reparations, such as Bruce's speech. Thank you. The system that works for everyone in the same way.
I love that.
I like that one too. Fairness for all.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, May.
Equal.
Veronica says equal respect and value.
And respect. Does somebody have an example or a story that highlights what justice means to you? Where you've seen justice in the world? That might be a hard one.
Well, this is something that just came to my mind, and it's in no way is this the end all be all, but I thought in the last couple of weeks, because I was trying to think about the concept of justice, and I know we're talking about what it means as far as fairness and equity, but what about justice for things already done, right? Like, um, what does that look like? And I think one of the most recent interesting things of justice for injustices that's already done is the returning of I believe it's in the British Museum, and some other museums. I can't remember. It might have been, can't remember exactly, but they're returning stolen artifacts to the country of Benin. I think that's one way to show up when you have these decades of injustice and things being pillaged. Like, how do you make right for injustice that's already happened in the past? And Adrienne, she's going to join us.
Hi. So I live in a really interesting part of Los Angeles. Our community is the historic head of the KKK in Los Angeles. And so there's been a lot of, yeah, really, Robyn, you can just stare at the screen for a second because it's true. I can't change that, okay? Growing up, I used to drive through this area and I would duck down because I was afraid at night of maybe being like pulled off the freeway or, pulled over and being like injured or worse, or my friends injured or worse. And so moving into this community was really scary for me, but it happened. Okay. And it's changed a lot. And we are actually the first community in California, the third community in the nation to have a sundown ruling. And that's partially at my urging, because we really aren't that community anymore. We're much more diverse. We're bringing in a lot more different kinds of people from all over the world. And so this was a first step. And we are continually asking the city council to add in new steps. And some things that they have done include looking at their own city employees to see, how their equity kind of panned out with their money. And it was disappointing, of course. And so they're working on that. And that's good, And we created a tenant landlord commission because we recognize that the reason that we don't have as much equity and equality in the community has to do with how the living situations are set up. So we've investigated that, and it's pretty cool. And we started a tenant landlord committee, which will be temporary for 12 months. And we're looking at who we want as potential commissioners and why. And what we're looking at are people who live in the community who are extremely underrepresented. So it's really interesting to see what we're getting at, because truth is that a lot of people who own the property, are part of this patriarchy that we're trying to bring into our fold. It's not that we want to get rid of them. We want to bring them on board. We just want everyone to learn about each other and accept that there's all different kinds of people, not just the people that mirror their image. So it's rough, but we just keep plowing on through the legislative ways. And I urge each of you to try to talk with your city council members and to try and work legislatively so that it's an ongoing thing.
Thank you, Adrian. A few things here. Lynn said consistent, fair, equitable treatment of everyone with respect and dignity. Amy says the ending of poverty would be justice because poverty is an injustice, access to schools with proper funding, and the ability to build generational wealth. That's so key. Heidi has her hand raised. We're going to get to you really soon. And then Tracy said one main injustice that concerns me is the legal system with people of color. This is really hard to deal with. Yes, because there's a lot of systemic and structural bias and racism built in these systems. Heidi?
Hi. I'm not sure how to turn my camera on, but oh, do I hit this button here?
I think, yes, in the left-hand corner.
Okay, now I can start the video. Thank you. I like this question, like, where do you see justice happening? Because so much we see injustice. And so I really had to think, and what came to mind to me is some of the things that came about from the Me Too movement. I think we have a long way to go in that area, but it's really powerful to see some of these really powerful men being held accountable. And I think that is impressive. And I think just the young people today, I mean, I'm heading into 40, and it was kind of like, I remember when I was younger and would go out with my friends, and it was kind of like, you just took it for granted that you would get groped, right? That's just part of going to a bar. And I see these young people today saying, no, you don't get to touch me. Like, that's not a thing. And that gives me a lot of hope for the future. Just women really practicing bodily autonomy, and obviously there's a long way to go in that, but I feel really hopeful for that, and I'm looking forward to seeing more justice in that area.
Thank you, Heidi. I think, Andrew, the next question. What museum exhibits or artistic performances have educated you or your children about social justice issues?
I love this question. I could take up the rest of the time, but I won't. I'm going to say two, and they were both in Washington, D.C. The Native American National Museum is so full of stories and accounts of the injustices that I just didn't learn about in school. That we were taught about the smallpox blankets, and that's a terrible injustice, but the full gamut of what we did to the indigenous people of this land just broke my heart. And then the Holocaust Museum. I visited that museum 5 times, and every time I learned something new, and it pushes me to do better in my own life and to, make sure my children are extremely educated about that. Adrian said I went to an art exhibit on Saturday in one of our libraries with a fantastic art exhibit about Black Lives Matter. Thank you, Adrian. Black Cowboy Museum in Colorado. That sounds interesting, Lynn.
Yes, the Buffalo Soldiers. Nice.
Also, our 46th inauguration. Yes.
For me, for one of the things that I took my daughters and I struggled with when to take them, and decided to wait till they were about 6 or 7, but the Blacks and Wax Museum in Baltimore. And then also kind of just, the art that we have in our house, the type of music that we listen to. I'm a, very much a part of hip hop culture, and I listen to mainly like socially conscious hip hop. So they've grown up around hearing that type of music. We, go to all of the festivals, Kwanzaa, we go to um, Happily Natural Day, which is something that happens here in Richmond. So I think festivals and just being in that environment is very important for children because again, it goes back to the modeling versus the having to say it. They just see it. Tracy says Science City in Kansas City hosts many exhibits to teachers social justice issues. Heidi says our local county museum had a really informative exhibit about immigration and new immigration law actually is, and how it's used to cost the equivalent of 8 hours of work to apply for immigration. And now it's thousands upon thousands. Anyone else before we go to our next set of questions? The Native American Museum was very eye-opening to me too. I took my daughters there when they were very young. I really love that museum.
Yeah, it's a must see for me. Every time I visit DC, I find myself in those two museums. And the last time I added the African American Museum, and it was very life-changing for me. I did not get to spend enough time. I was there in the afternoon, and I should have really devoted a whole day to it.
Yeah, I've even heard 2 days. I've heard that you really have to really get it, you have to break it up in two.
Yeah, the Green Book exhibit and the African American Museum was pivotal in changing my kids' minds about race. It was really great.
Adrian says, I look at quilting, especially very local quilting, because that is a form of expression.
Yeah,
definitely.
I love that. I read a book, Adrian, I can't remember what it was called, but it talked about the women and the storytelling of with the quilts. It was so informative. That's so good.
Next slide, Andrew. Okay.
How do you make justice a part of your home environment? All right.
Good question.
It's a great question. For me, I think that I can't teach about justice without being just between my kids and making things fair and equitable. And, everybody's culture is included and everybody is equal. Like there isn't a brother that is at a higher standard than the other brothers.
Mm-hmm. For me, I guess, as an African American, for me, it's like, how can I not? I mean, just because of being African American in America, my daughters have had as early as elementary school, little kids, issues that they would come home and say, Mom, what is this? Or when something that I would teach them in our home about history and our culture didn't add up in school. 6, 7, Mom, you taught us this, but the teacher said this. And so there was a lot of those conversations, and having to explain to them, what that looks like, which is a really hard conversation to have with a 6 and 7-year-old, explaining them about how, everything in history is necessarily included and the why and etc. And then also just teaching them. I mean, when you teach kids, African American history, even though I go all the way back to Africa as well, but the virtue of teaching them about the history makes justice a part of your home, because a lot of people who they learn about, what they're known for is the fight against injustice. Even though we talk about science and culture and art, to balance it out. There's some comments here. Alina says, with all the recent injustice going on, I think it's important to have those conversations on what justice with certain situations would look like and start that conversation in the household or among friends. Agreed. Lynn says, we have a multitude of books at home on various topics related to the African-American experience. And then Andrew says, one thing I want to do is to be intentional about what is and what isn't playing on TV.
I love
Very.
that, Andrew.
Yes.
That is so important to me as well. And
Me too.
making sure that all kinds of people, you know, grace my TV screen. I don't watch a lot of TV, first of all. You know, I think that it's hard in our house to watch TV. But the one thing I've always done is push pause. I do this with TV and with music. What do they mean by that?
Yes.
That's a question I say a lot. And not to make light of anything, but comedy teaches, and shows that are funny can teach. Like, I love the show Blackish. I have learned so much from Blackish just by them bringing up a subject and me going in and researching it and asking more questions about it with my kids. So yeah, I think that being intentional is awesome. And then Betty says, I think social media platforms are amazing. I follow Brown Issues on Instagram, and it informs me of so many social injustice issues going on, not only in the Mexican community, but in the also Native Americans and African Americans. Thank you, Betty. I'm going to look that up.
I think you have to be intentional, like any other value that you teach in your home that you want your kids to know and learn. It's the same thing about justice. It has to show up in what you talk about at the dinner table, what you watch, why you watch it, where you go. Definitely. Next question. How do you practice justice in your relationships?
For our family, I think this looks like a equal distribution of work, that things aren't in genderized roles, like this is a dad's job and this is a mom's job, and making it fair and play to our strengths and our weaknesses, and some of those things are maybe more stereotypical than others, but my husband can cook a great meal too, and my sons don't shy away from doing laundry. These, that are typical stereotypical 1950s roles of a woman. I work, a job outside my home. Yeah, those are the ways we do it. And making sure that and not just, this is relationships, and I really just went to my household, like my husband relationship, but it's really in my relationship with my kids as well. It's like being free to call each other out on missteps. Oh, you know what? You
Yes.
shouldn't say that because of this. And I heard this, and then, kind of punctuate it with a story.
Yes, thank you. So Colette says she never watched Blackish because the title turned her off. Adrian said there are a lot of times I listen and validate my friends' concerns, may have experienced hate and a need to voice it. Portia says, I feel young people today stick to the surface of the facts they learn on social media and not willing to do any fact finding. I wouldn't even put that to an age, Portia. I think it depends, because I've seen some of the kids, particularly my children and some of their friends, the social media, like TikTok in general, makes them ask questions. And then I know a whole lot of adults that feel like because they see things on social media, that they then, to your point, don't have to read books, don't know have to hear. It's like this cursory summary. And so now I think I understand, or I think that I know. Lynn says, I try to understand different points of view and listen mindfully. Definitely. I think, Robyn, one of the things that you said that I really agree with is that justice in friendships and relationships means being able to hold each other accountable. I totally agree with that. If it doesn't show up like that, then how can we even expect it to happen any type of collective accountability? It can't, because people haven't been taught that.
And before we read Andrew's comment, Alex, I just want to kind of add to that. Like, that's another sense of modeling for me. How am I going to expect my kids to call out injustice if they're not taught at home?
Definitely.
They have to be able to strengthen that muscle because that's scary and intimidating. And a lot of adults don't do it because we get anxiety around it, because we do. So
Mhm.
yeah. Andrew says, my wife is Filipino, and I try to practice justice in our relationship in part by showing respect to her family and their culture, and to learn more about the history of their country and the current political and social culture. I want to make sure that when we have children, I don't act like my culture and upbringing should be the default for how they are raised. Thank you
Great
for sharing
point.
that, Andrew. And Adrian added, learning how to respect others' cultures and experience is important and uplifting. And Portia added, no child is born a racist. That's right,
Very
Portia.
true.
Totally.
Next slide, Andrew. What do you tell a friend who is struggling with injustice? Any takers?
I think for me, this is where the empathy comes in. I might not have ever experienced injustice, or maybe I did and minimized it, but I can listen and I can say that that's hard. Tell me about it. And I can bear witness to their pain and to their plight. And if I have any like resources to give.
Definitely. Portia has her hands raised, and Colette said, you listen and hear what they are saying and you empathize. Tracy says you must stay open-minded. All situations are different. And whatever you do, Adrian says, do not walk away. And can we go ahead and let Portia in? Hi, Portia.
Hi. Texting sometimes is a battle for me when I'm trying to express myself. I'm a storyteller. However, I have found that when people ask, well, what can I do or how can I help her? I say that one thing you should do is listen, but then don't turn the table where you're seeking empathy for how you feel you don't want to be viewed. How if you put something into action. So I suggest to volunteer and to look at organizations in which you can help communities of people in which you feel as if it's assumed that you have not a negative viewpoint on that particular community, and go in and do something to help, whether or not it's food or programs or donations. But I say volunteer so that you are able to work with and become a part of that community in which you have for some reason been disassociated with, and it's truly not a equity division, a racial division, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Portia. Great story about the piece. I really identify with where it gets flipped sometimes to like, oh, well, I'm not this. And I think that goes back to the other question, Robyn, like being taught, not to be defensive when people are expressing themselves, I think makes a big difference. May says, be a shoulder for them to lean on. Listen, listen, listen. That just basically summed up what we were saying too. Thank you, May. Anyone else? We're at 1:53. I think we have, Maria says, after listening, hearing, and empathizing, you may need to direct the person to a resources, as the injustice could be something that warrants legal intervention. Yes, yes. And there's one more question on this slide. Oh, the last slide. Who is a person in your life who lives out justice? Who is a person in your life who lives out justice? So I'll answer. It's a lot. For me, I've been kind of like on this journey for a long time. I mean, I actually grew up watching my father advocate for justice in the legal system. I watched him advocate or do things for the community. So it was something that was instilled in me as a child. It's something that I saw my grandparents talk about and do, and just very much a part of my life. Like there are multiple people within my family and my friends. I mainly like, that thing you attract who you are. So most of the people that I, attract into my life have a sense of justice and learning and understanding. And then we all kind of mutually share on our path to help each other grow. Adrian says, I choose my friends by what they do, not by what they say, as my children are powerhouses. Maria says, my mother, pastor, spouse, colleagues, and friends. Thank you both. Portia says, past, Mary McLeod Bethune, present, my grandmother. Great examples. Who the great Bethune-Cookman College was named after, one of the HBCUs. So anyone last minute before you call? Okay, great. May says her mother and her older sister. Future, our children. I'm very inspired by the Gen Z. My daughters are in Gen Z and they are just very inspired. Lynn says my prayer partners, definitely important. Yeah, the kids, these kids now are very open. They're just amazing to see how it's all coming together. I can't wait to see what that generation is going to be like at like 24 and 25. Amen to the prayer circles, Portia said. Definitely. I think, no matter what religion you are, faith and justice have always had this strong intersection. And I think also, faith and resilience when it comes around justice. I love to make sure that there are people who are around me, especially when you're dealing with injustice, who have resilient spirits, because it makes all the world of a difference when someone is, able to say, hey, I went through something similar, and then, this is what I did to try to deal with it. And it can be very inspiring. And if they haven't gone through anything similar, just sharing triumph over any difficult situation has been helpful for the people in my life who live out justice. Thank you. Robyn, you have any last thoughts? Any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, this is a really challenging question for me because I have some really great colleagues that, live out social justice or, justice, not just social justice, justice across the board, who I'm extremely grateful for like blazing the path. This wasn't a topic that was talked about in my family. It just wasn't. So I'm fledgling, even though, I'm middle-aged now. It didn't really open my eyes until about 20 years ago. And I just, I'm standing on the shoulders of people who are deep in this stuff and taking my lessons from them. And somebody said before, and I think they said it 3 times, listen, listen, listen. And those are the lessons that I'm learning. Shut up and listen. Your opinion doesn't matter as much as you think it does.
Well, I would say you listen very well.
That's right.
You listen very well. And one of the things that I admire about Robyn, in this work, particularly in the DEI work and racial justice work, is that she's one of these people that somebody hinted toward this earlier, that doesn't just speak it. I actually see her walk it out, and I see it show back up. And those are the things that I have tremendous admiration and respect for her. because
That
it's
means
so
a lot
easy
to
to
me
talk
coming
to
from my
them.
teacher. That's, thank
Stop.
you.
But you know, a lot of people talk this, and I think that's what this webinar is about today, the difference between talking it and living it and showing it to your kids.
Mhm.
Next slide. We have 1 minute. Amplify. This is the one. We want to amplify justice. Please take the ending poll that Andrew just put up. Also, go into our social media, do hashtag amplify. Tell us what type of justice you want to amplify in your community so we can be the change we want to see. Join us for the rest of the week for the webinars. Tomorrow's going to be Café, More Perfect Union. It will be in Spanish. On Wednesday, grappling with the reality of incarceration. That should be very good. Talking about the prison industrial complex, mass incarceration with Kathy and Leticia. And then there is another webinar that someone has to translate for me in Spanish on Thursday. And then Friday, you get to actually participate in a full taste of the More Perfect Union Cafe, which is where some of these questions come from, but you'll actually get to experience it as a parent cafe. So please join us. Thank you for being here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll be able to see the English and Spanish webinars and continue the conversation with the More Perfect Union Cafe in the Box. We were glad to join you. Thank you, Robyn. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for everyone for being authentic and participating with us. We appreciate you showing up today.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Bye.
See you again soon.